Welcome to Artful Aging with Amy, where I ask caregivers and professionals the difficult questions that will give you guidance on your life's journey. Support is only one conversation away, and this is your first step. Let's go. Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Friesen, and this is Artful Aging with Amy. Have you ever thought to yourself, perhaps I should downsize or get rid of a few things in my home? Or have you moved and had to downsize your belongings to accommodate another space? It does seem easy on the surface, but some questions like, what should I do with all of my stuff? What should I keep? How do I get rid of things? What happens if you don't want to downsize and you have to deal with all the emotional stuff that comes with that? Also, how do you start the process? And what if you do want to downsize, but you're super overwhelmed? My guest today is no stranger to the downsizing process and the moving process. As a military spouse, Rita Monteiro has had to look over all the logistics of downsizing and moving on multiple occasions. Rita takes great joy for knowing that her and her team are able to help in more ways than one. Their clients feel relief and confident that they've preserved as much wealth as possible, and I'm proud that they have helped the community and kept as many items as possible out of the landfills. Welcome, Rita. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Rita, maybe you could share your story with us and why you do what you do.
Yeah, I'm someone who really enjoys change. In the last 15 years, on average, I've moved every 2 years. I'm no stranger to the logistics of moving, upsizing, downsizing, and of course, this experience and knowledge only increased in intensity since becoming a military spouse. Being really task oriented and organized, I found myself enjoying the process. And I think having a positive outlook on the experience kind of gave me a bit of a reputation. And I became kind of a resource in my circles, military and personal. But it wasn't until I had to downsize a family member's home, non-military, that I realized how much more challenging it is for non-military families. And oftentimes it's seniors and their loved ones that are most affected. Having been involved both in downsizing and estate clearing for military and civilians, it's clear that the same level of support isn't guaranteed outside of the military. And that's part of the inspiration for Alivio Solution.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And it's true. I find that generally the seniors in our community are trying to downsize, and it's really, really overwhelming. There's so many years, often in the same home at that point, and they may not be able to do as many things as they used to be able to do or have the stamina to downsize. So, having professionals like you to be able to help is super advantageous for folks that are downsizing, that need the help.
Absolutely.
Maybe we could also talk about, why would someone look to downsize? Is there any ideal time to downsize? Like, let's look at the picture of starting. So let's start with, why would people want to downsize?
Yeah, so why someone would consider a downsize is highly personal. But the most common reason to downsize that we've seen is when the house becomes more of a burden than a source of joy for the person living in it, and their support system, right? Because they're the ones that also take the brunt of it. So often this happens because of health issues, lack of mobility, like you had touched on, which means the space can't be properly maintained. They're paying more for a space that they're not quite using. They're not using all the amenities that they used to. In an ideal situation, it's a lifestyle choice. Many seniors have expressed that they get lonely. They want to be in a community, whether it's independent living or in a retirement home. And there's a big shift in their quality of life that we've seen when community is re-injected in their day-to-day. As for ideal time, it's always best to not wait until it becomes urgent and everyone's left scrambling. There's a lot of value in taking the time, and I'm going to put a lot of emphasis on time to find the next place of residence, so it's a place that everyone is happy and at peace with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find, more often than not, the top two things you said there about having so much space that they're not using, as well as just being lonely, and as well as, a lot of people downsize too, wouldn't you agree, because of stairs and, actual mobility to get around their house. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I recently helped a client, but a lot of our clients are that like this, and they literally were living in the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom. That was
Yeah,
it, you know,
exactly.
and it seems like, such a house, that generally is a couple of bedrooms, a couple, maybe a bathroom or two, a kitchen, things like that. It's so hard to maintain, especially if you're not using it. You're not even going into those rooms. And then I think people discount the amount of mental strain that would be involved in, having all of this stuff around and not using it, but then having to worry about it at the same time.
Yes, very good point.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. We've seen lots of different scenarios. As you know, I help people move to retirement living. So lots of reasons people are looking to downsize. I guess maybe Rita, could you talk about some of the added benefits of downsizing? I think we touched on them, but is there anything else that you've seen as benefits once people actually downsize and either they stay in their own spot, they move to a smaller house or a condo, or they move to retirement living or long-term care? What have you seen?
Yeah. So downsizing doesn't have to be a one-time process. It could happen in early retirement, for example, and then again in old age or older age. In our experience, clients who have done like the big downsize and now are doing another to a retirement home, they're far less stressed. Whereas those who don't, the stress is overwhelming and they often give up. And then the downsize only happens when they're backed against a wall, which is really unfortunate. The one thing that we've seen once a downsize is complete, though, is that our clients wish they had done it earlier and I think that's because moving's scary. I mean, for most people, it's a big process. It's a lot of work. So but once the job is done, especially when they have a good support system, they realize that the idea of downsizing was far bigger a burden than the actual downsize itself.
Well, and I always caution our families and our clients to look at the opposite side of that. What if you don't downsize? What are the downfalls of not downsizing? One, you get kind of stuck in place and you don't do anything, which means that your health is most likely going to start failing. Then you got to do it in a crisis. And then a lot of times too is, I see more often when people move houses as opposed to retirement living, but they don't know what to do with their stuff. So everything goes in a box and I'll figure it out on the other end. I have been guilty of doing that myself. Everything else in a box and I will figure it out and see if there's a place for it on the other end. But it's not less stressful that way. It's just, we got to the end of the line and we're moving and there's the date and now we're going. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people who will pay for storage because it's a less emotional and intellectual burden than to actually sort through the stuff.
Absolutely. Well, and don't even get me started on storage. That is something I've seen a lot of people do in either in the retirement home. Some have storage or
Yeah.
storage lockers. And you're right. People just cram them full and they never visit again. When
Yeah.
I first started dating my husband, he had a storage locker and that's what it looked like. And I was like, we can't do this.
Yeah, they're no, exactly. They're just deferring the downsize to a later time, which it's never better at a later time. It's never a good time.
Well,
Like it has to be dealt with.
well, and they're also, outside storage as well. They're also increasing a cost that they might not need. And essentially you're just storing stuff to not deal with it. A lot of people store things that they want to keep and stuff. But in this scenario, most people are storing it because they don't want to deal with it and they never go visit. They never go and sort it out. And it's there for years and years and years and years. And you're just
Yeah.
paying this monthly fee for no reason, really. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. As military families, we kind of have a little bit of a cheeky joke that if we move things and on the next move, they haven't been unpacked, they stay. We're not bringing them with us.
Right. Yeah. It's tricky, but I think that people need to really understand that, storing stuff that you're not sure about isn't really a solution. So let's not do
No.
that. Let's take the extra time and go through things, save yourself some hassle down the road and save yourself some money as well.
And feel relieved.
That's right. You don't have to, it's still a mental burden. Whether you have it stored somewhere else or not, you're still thinking about it. You still know it.
Exactly.
And, worst case scenario also if someone was to move to long-term care, retirement, anywhere really, and was happened to have passed away, then their family then has to deal with all of this extra storage, and the family is often grieving, and so it's just like this one extra thing. So if you're a senior watching, help out a little bit. I know it's very overwhelming, but there's definitely resources like Rita around that can help with this downsizing process and eliminate some of the extra tension that could come down the way. It's very tricky, but
Mm.
Rita, many families feel like they can handle the downsizing and moving process all on their own, and some are correct. However, I've seen downsizing really take a toll on families because it can be really emotional and super exhausting. Have you seen this as well? And what are some of the other misconceptions that you have come across in this area that we can help debunk for our audience?
Yeah, this is actually really common. A lot of clients recount how they or their kids start the process, get overwhelmed, and give up. If there isn't a system in place, if the resources aren't investigated in advance, it is a lot to do, especially if it's on the sidelines of an already busy life full of responsibilities. But a successful and low stress downsize can totally be done with a bit of time again and pre-planning. This is why it's a good idea to start thinking about it before it becomes urgent.
Which is basically what I say on every episode in some way or another. And all of my guests say as well, let's plan, let's be proactive, let's not leave it to the last minute. I'm sure if our longtime viewers have seen this in literally every episode because it's so important, right?
Yep.
What are the best strategies that you have found for individuals wanting to downsize and move from their home into a rental or a retirement home or a condo, like a smaller home? What are some of
Mhm.
the things that you've seen for best strategies?
I think the mental load is the biggest thing on many different planes. So not just the actual downsize and dealing with the physical stuff, but acceptance is a huge factor. If the person moving is happy or even looking forward to the new place of residence, and they have support both with the move and on the emotional side from their loved ones, it's a much smoother transition. This may mean using a service like ours, or maybe asking family and friends that they could really rely on. The last thing again is time. When sorting items, a lot of people get stuck on the nagging maybe pile, and time is the best way to naturally form detachment to those items.
Yeah, and I think that generally people are so overwhelmed, but people also have a hard time asking for help. Right. I myself am going through my own things in our family, and it's hard to ask for help, especially, I'm very independent. Do my things on my own, but I've had to reach out for help, and it's really tough if you're not used to it and you've been, living independently, you've been doing everything, and then all of a sudden you just have to, there's this change, and it doesn't matter what it is, downsizing, moving, anything, and you need to
Mhm.
ask for help or you need to ask for support, and it's okay. Ask for it. People are willing and wanting to help, would you say?
Yeah, oftentimes people want to help and they don't know how. So you asking actually allows them to do the thing that they wanted to do anyways.
Yeah, people aren't mind readers, right? You
Exactly.
have to ask for what you need, which is tricky, but
Yeah.
hopefully, people will take a stride and try to do that more often, because it really gets people bogged down and they just kind of stay in one spot as instead. So, as a military spouse, I know that you are all too familiar personally with what it's like to downsize and move, as we were talking about. What does downsizing look like for families in the military and their extended family, like their parents?
hmm Um, so for their parents, it's usually quite complicated because most military members don't live anywhere near their parents. So services like these could be really helpful. To kind of limit the time that they need to take away from work, travel across the country, manage things that they probably don't, they would rather spend time with their family member than to manage these things. As for military members moving, it's pretty chaotic. People assume that because we're given movers who pack and unpack, it's easy. The truth is, we're often informed within weeks of moving. And in that time, we have to sell our homes. We have 5 days to find a new home in another province and close in 5 days. Our spouses are often away while we're left to get everything ready, to include figuring out what furniture will fit in the new home. The other thing is movers are very different than downsizers who will resettle. It's not uncommon to arrive at our new home and find all her possessions kind of scattered all over the home. And there are a lot of things that we can't move. So, fuel in our mowers, alcohol, cleaning supplies, food. So normally we have to share within our military community, especially with those who are coming in, because they had to do the same. But that takes a lot of planning and time as well.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even realize. Absolutely. It would take a lot of organization on everybody's part to make sure it works, smoothly. I would say smoothly in quotation
Yeah.
marks because it sounds like it would be a little bit bumpy, but
Yeah, and avoid waste too. That's
right.
for me especially. That's really, it's not fun to throw out a bunch of food that's in good shape, nowhere near expiry or alcohol or any of it. Like it's just wasteful. And so if we could, help somebody out and not create waste, this is both in the military community and at Alivio, like that is the goal.
For sure. For sure. How does downsizing and moving within the same area differ for those who are downsizing in one city or province and moving to another city or province?
It's a good question. So for downsizing itself, it doesn't differ greatly. Just you have to figure out what resources are available to you in that area. But for interprovincial moves, for non-military people, they might just sell their large possessions like furniture and cars and repurchase in the new province, which is far easier. But for military members who move every 2 to 5 years, that doesn't make financial sense. So we have to ship our cars. We have to find ways to make our furniture fit in the new house, which is sometimes very comical. Also, in terms of moving, local services can just be transferred, whereas interprovincial services need to be canceled and then reinitiated in the new province. But it's not always super obvious how that works. A good example is when we moved from Quebec to Edmonton. In Quebec, the hydro is one provider. There's one number that you call, whereas in Alberta, there's several sources and subsources. And it took several hours on the phone, several days to fully understand how it worked. This was on top of having to track my car on the railway so I could be ready to receive it. Settling the house to a livable standard, looking for new healthcare as soon as possible. The list goes on. So it's definitely a lot more logistically complicated when you're moving from one province to another.
Which I would also say more reason to actually surround yourself with professionals and people who can get things done so that you take as much burden as possible. And then on the point of healthcare, especially for our senior community, we're also worried about health numbers like our OHIP cards and transferring and how long that takes and all that stuff. And that's something that we're very aware of in my field, what we do, because when people are moving to retirement, they don't need a health card. It doesn't need to be, a specific province necessarily, but into long-term care it does, because they need to be a member of that province, on paper, essentially, right? So transferring that's been tricky.
I bet.
Rita, what are some of the top tips to get organized and ready to downsize? How can we help our audience?
I'm going to sound like a broken record here, Amy, but pre-plan. Make sure time is on your side and use the resources out there to lessen the burden. It doesn't have to be stressful. There is help out there.
Awesome. Can you let our audience know how to reach you, Rita?
Yeah. So website is aliviosolution.com or downsizingrelief.com. Or you could email me directly at rita@aliviosolution.com.
Well, thank you so much, Rita, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope that people will take a step in their downsizing and moving journey to get some assistance, or at least, reach out to family members and not be afraid to ask. So thank you so much for enlightening us some more today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for Artful Aging with Amy today. I hope that you have found our chat helpful and that you'll share it with your networks. Remember, support is only one conversation away, and the more that you can share, the more families that can get helped, really. And so, from me to all of you, I hope that you have a wonderful Wednesday.